possible. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like your own house. I
Yeah,
mean, if you
exactly.
don't have a proper fence around it.
Yeah. But you know, that fence that we have seen at the Lebombo post when we drove down the hill towards the railway line, that was a proper fence. No, no, that is a type of fence
That's the
in a
type of.
concrete foundation. That is a type of fence that I mean, I'm not an expert, but that looks to me like a proper fence and a a border fence. So all these flimsy stuff that they are using is just not good enough.
It's really not good enough. I
No,
mean, the
no.
stuff that was put up by the Department of Public Works,
Yeah,
you know, is that type of fence that they use for to control crowds,
exactly.
and, and so on. And I mean, it's highly unsuited for environment
Yeah,
like that one because it will be exposed to all types of weather.
yeah,
You know,
exactly.
yeah.
I think it was the colonel in Komatipoort who said if you take that fence and you bend it like
Yeah,
that, then it clips.
indeed, indeed.
Yeah,
I mean, it's and on interview, one guy said, "No man, but Denel, there is Denel there. Where was
yeah.
Denel? Because
Oh well.
Denel should have actually recommended a proper fence."
Yeah,
He
exactly.
says in other countries like in America and
Yeah,
elsewhere,
yeah.
equipments. In fact, the military is involved in designing the equipments that they need.
But
They
remember,
get
we
involved.
we, we have got an engineering core, and that engineering core is also very much different from what it was in the past. In the
I see.
past, they would have been involved in all these things.
In all these things, yeah.
But because of that scaling down, and I think to a large extent, the Defence Force has lost that much of that capabilities. And it
Well,
was there,
actually,
and we should have an engineering core, a proper engineering corps.
yeah, yeah. Well, it was expected that we would not have the capacity that we had before 1994
No,
because
no, certainly
there
not.
was this pool of skill
Absolutely.
available, as a result of people
Yeah,
being conscripted into the military.
yeah, yeah,
So a fellow would say, I'm a doctor and
yeah,
I'm not going to carry a gun. I can offer
yeah,
my craft. I'm a
yeah,
plumber, I'm an engineer, and
yeah,
this and that.
yeah.
So in other words, they were never short of,
Never.
never short.
But there
You
was
know.
also a lot of money spent in, maybe too much, but I mean, there was a lot of money spent in training and upskilling of people to do
As a
all that
result of
work and to
people
draw
being conscripted
expertise
into the
and
military.
whether it
So
was
a fellow would
justified
say,
or
I'm a
not. I mean,
doctor
they at least they did
and
it, and
I'm not going to carry a
I think
gun.
that
I
that
can
the
offer
spend
my
of
craft.
GDP was
I'm a
probably one of
plumber,
the
I'm an
major
engineer.
portion of GDP, but still, yeah, it's just a pity that we've lost
And
some
no,
of
no, no,
that.
no. The previous government invested every single cent, every single
Absolutely,
available cent in the military.
absolutely.
Yeah. Now this one has
Yeah,
to, it has to. I mean, the defense forces to compete with other needs. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
housing and social grants. Paying bursaries at universities and so on and
and
so forth.
and also SAA.
And also, oh yeah,
Hey,
yeah. Maria, we have a challenge, a bit of a challenge. I want to imagine that some members are still in the house. And
I've also not just now went out of the house, so
yeah,
there might be still of the members in the house, and they might recuse themselves probably after.
they'll have to recuse themselves because
Yeah,
I mean, after this debate,
yeah,
it's a consideration of the standing
yeah, yeah,
uh, committee on appropriate on is a report of Scopa.
yeah, yeah. So it's not important. I didn't say it's not important, but I mean it's not obligatory for us, and I think our
Yeah,
members.
no, I
I
doubt.
will find out from Shalembe where he is, and so that he can join as well.
Let me also check with my other
Okay,
colleagues here.
okay, okay, sir.
Sure.
Your default is to speak.
Is your laptop your personal one? Yeah, if it's your personal laptop, well, if it's a DOD, don't.
No, but my one is the yeah.
Your personal,
No, it's
then it's an old one.
No,
Your
just shared my screen
all the new ones. All new laptop. You can't. Yeah. Huh? If you have a new laptop now, you can't use Zoom, you can't use any of these activities. All the apps.
Teams is working. I had a meeting.
The new one.
Teams is working. I don't know about Zoom.
Because you see, with me, I have two laptops, personal one.
Yeah.
Because I can't even go into Google on the new one.
No, it doesn't work.
From their side.
Okay,
And
let's do
maybe
this.
if they do that, maybe it will help us with the.
Sorry, Chairperson, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear both of you. I
Oh,
can hear
wonderful.
Seth and I can also hear you as well.
Yeah.
Okay, no, perfect. Yeah, then
Disable
out.
and then put the slides. Or
Yeah.
the slides they will load from their side.
We can actually load it from here. No, here, yeah. So you will control it from here. Are we still?
Are you able to do it from that side?
They'll tell us when to.
Are you able to load it on your side?
Yes.
let me start the meeting. I know we're not correct as yet. It's just the 5 of us, but colleagues, I've asked colleagues to leave the chamber and log in because we're not voting in the House, so it's not that critical. 2, the meeting was approved by the authorities in Parliament, so they are aware that we're having a meeting. And yeah, all right. Be that as it may, we only have one item on the agenda. That is the briefing by the secretary on the annual report of the Department of Defense. We have done briefings on the other 2 entities, the 3 entities. Yeah, we've done, we received a briefing from the Department of Military Veterans and from the CCP and from AMSCO. So the draft report is prepared, it's still in draft though, waiting for this aspect that we are transacting tonight. So without wasting much time, let me welcome the SecDef and the CFO, the Chief Defense Planning Strategy and Policy, Dr. Gamede, the Head of Communication, Dlamini, the Compliance Officer, Mr. Abusi, and the Chief Military Planning Strategy and Policy, General Ramazwana, 7, the Director Planning, Van den Berg, and of course the PLO. So that's the delegation from the Department of Defense. Initially, they were still struggling, uploading the presentation. Have you succeeded, Secretary?
Yes, Chairperson, we can upload from our side. Yes. And maybe just to mention that General Ramantswana is on study leave, so he wouldn't be here, but the rest.
Okay, that's fine. No, we take note of that. All right. Brian, do we have formal apologies just for the record?
Yes, Chair, we have an apology from Ms. Mthembu, who she is unavailable due to another commitment that she has. That is the only. Oh, and we also, I'm sorry, Chair, have Ms. Modise, who has indicated that she will be joining us during the course of the meeting.
Because she's still in the house, eh?
Yes, Chair.
All right. So we note those apologies. And SecDef, are there any apologies on your side?
From our side, Chairperson, those that we've invited are here. So okay. We are good to go.
All right. SecDef, welcome to
Thank you very much.
Yourself and the team. I'm now inviting you to brief us on your 2019-2020 annual report. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. And I'm hoping that you can see our slides from that side.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay.
Just make it to one big slide. There you are. Thanks.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you very much, Chairperson and honorable members. So we are here to present our 2019 audited annual report to you. So on slide number 2 here, we are trying to show you what we are presenting for the financial year 2019-2020. And then on slide number 3, here we are giving a brief of background that talks to the regulatory framework that we had to comply with subsequent to COVID-19 lockdown. And then also that meant that there would be a number of amended legislative target dates that we had to comply with, because then things had to shift. And then on slide number 4 here, Chairperson, what you see before you is the annual report structure content, which is divided into 5 parts. Part A, which is the general information, performance information, governance, human resource management, and also the last part, which is part E, will talk to the issues of financial information. And then the third part is the Auditor General's audit outcomes for the year that ended 31st March, and the report on the audit of the annual performance report. And then also we look at the report of the audit of the financial statements. And then there are also things that we need to look at, which have to do with the basis for qualified opinion. And then also we'll touch on the issues of material irregularity. And then if you go to slide number 7, Chairperson, here we are giving you a little bit of information around our background. So this annual report seeks to bring to provide the civil oversight committees of Parliament and the people of South Africa an overview of our performance as the Department of Defense on the financial year that is under review, and that is the year 2019-2020. And then also we do mention that the DOD annual report instruction was dated 30th January 2020, which then gave effect to the legislative framework applicable on how we do our annual reports, and also provided the guidelines that we needed to comply with as a way of doing our inputs into the annual report. And then you would see when you, Chairperson, further down, we do mention that because then COVID-19 was something that we had to contend with, then it meant that we needed to have supplementary guidelines and instruction relating to how we're going to handle our annual reports. And these, first one, the National Treasury updated their annual report guide, and that happened during the period of March 2020. Those amended guidelines basically had to do with the content and format of our annual reports. And then on the second one was the Government Gazette 43188, which was for the end of March. And then that one, it provided exemption from complying with deadlines in terms of the PFMA. As you would know that we had to shift our deadlines, and then by this time we would have long already presented our annual reports. And then the third one is also another National Treasury Circulation 2019/20, which was dated 10th June 2020 to accounting officers, stating that financial year end procedures, closure and submission dates for all PFMA compliant institutions as amended. And they give us the dates, the sections when we had to comply with our annual reports, and then the submission of the audit reports from the Auditor General, as well as tabling our annual reports with the deadline of the 30th of November. The fourth one was the letter that came from the Auditor General with that date. And then what the letter from the Auditor General was basically telling us that they would have finished their auditing by the 30th of October. But I think that the date had to shift a little bit. And then the fifth one is the notification from the Deputy President, which was dated the 3rd of September 2020 to all members of the executive, requesting that the tabling of annual reports and financial statements must happen before the 16th of November 2020. And then we also did receive a letter from Parliament that was directed to the Minister, which was dated 23rd September, which was also requesting that a draft DOD annual report needed to be submitted by the 1st of October, and that in preparation for the BRRR process for the annual report briefings, which were to take place from the 6th to the 15th of October. And then the notification on number 7 was the one from the Deputy President, which was dated 29 September 2020, and it was directed to all executives requesting the tabling of these annual reports and financial statements by the end of October and not later than the 16th of November. And then the last one was the one on the AXA, the letter of 06611, Reg 1920, and then that one, it was regarding the delay in the issuing of the Auditor General's report, as we did mention, and then the AG's office had committed then that all the audited reports will be finalized by the 13th of November. And our signed audit report was received on the 12th of November 2020. And then there again, we talked to some of the legislative dates, because then usually we would have concluded our financial year by the 31st of May, and then we had the financial statements by 31st May, and then it had to be shifted to the 31st of July of this year. And then also when this implied that the annual draft report then had to be submitted to Auditor General by the end of May, July each year. And then we, AXA then completed the audit and provided their audit reports to Parliament for relevant financial year. And this was usually done during July, September and October, but then finally this had to be done around the 12th of November. And then on that one, the next page, on page 13, we still look at the amended legislative date targets. And here within the 5 months of the end of the financial year to Treasury, we had to deal with the issues of the annual report on the activities of the department. We also needed to look at the financial statements for financial year under review, and then also the Auditor General's report on those statements. And this then meant that the final audited DOD annual report was to be presented by the accounting officer to the executive authority, as well as to the National Treasury by the end of November. And then of course, the tabling department. So Chairperson, if you go to slide number 15, there we are going to the second part of our report, the DOD annual report and the structure and content. The part A of it talks to all the issues that you have here, but we are going to talk to each one of them one by one, so I wouldn't really take you through that one. Now, Chairperson, on slide number 18 here, we focus our presentation on the strategic overview of the annual report. Here, we focus on the contribution for the financial year 2019 and 20, where the Defence Force covers, we table our activities covering the period 2014 to 2019, which is the MTSF, on the work that had been done by the Defence, Department of Defence, to the sovereignty of South Africa, and also safeguarding the authority of the state. As we were moving forward towards the end of the financial year, the armed forces have been preoccupied with the activities of coronavirus, COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, and the DOD had to assume the role that was given to it by the Commander-in-Chief, which was to deploy in accordance with the provisions that are made in our Constitution, as well as in the Defence Act. We must say that despite the severe budget cuts during the 2014-2019 MTSF period, Defence has done fairly well in terms of fulfilling its constitutional mandate. The Defence budget has been cut beyond the bone and the special defense account, which is a key instrument that helps us to enable the defense to execute its approved defense acquisition projects. And then also this is coming close to its demise, the special defense account. I think as we go to the next financial year, it will almost be non-existent. One of the things that we are touching on is the major acquisition projects for the landward forces, and then also for the maritime forces. And these are under serious threat in terms of their completion because of the lack of resources. And this also by extension will mean that there will be huge impact on our defense industry as a whole. These budget reductions, Chairperson, continue to have an adverse effect on whether the department is able to deliver on the capability of the defense, its sustainability, as well as the modernization of defense and the prime mission equipment and the defense industry as a whole. And it makes it very difficult also to arrest the decline that had been addressed in the 2015 defense review. ARMSCO will also be will have challenges in the coming year because they also have to reduce projects for the financial year 2020 and 21. And then I think when we get to the year 21-22, we'll almost have no zero budget for them to be able to do most of our work. On slide number 20, Chairperson, continuing with the strategic overview, we also speak to the reductions that have negatively impacted and continue to affect the implementation of the decisions of the defense review of 2015 that really talk to the arresting of the capability of a decline. There will be general loss of capacity within the defense industry as a result of these reduced departmental spend. For year 2017, 2018 to 2020-21, we have lost up to 7 billion rands in revenue, and that is attributed the revenue lost to our defense industry, which is a significant dent if you look at it in terms of the contribution to the gross domestic product. The defense industry itself has lost, the workforce has declined from 15,000 to 12,000 in the same period. And I think this begins to paint the picture of how bad the situation is as impacted by the budget cuts. All these concerns put together, Chairperson, it suffices to say that they will culminate in the inability to meet the future SANDF requirements for critical capabilities. And this will also hamper the department's support to the national government imperatives and implementation of the SA Defense Review of 2015. And this, as you know, was adopted by Parliament and meant to become a blueprint for the future of how our SANDF is going to look. And then again on slide number 21, apart from the role of the had been played by the head of the department and accounting officer of the department, my predecessor, the Secretary of Defense, Dr. Sam Kulube, also co-chaired the JCPS cluster of government at the DG level. It was therefore incumbent on him to lead and coordinate activities in the following key areas. One of those is that because we hadn't even planned for COVID-19, that teams had to be put together to oversee the process of supporting the work that was carried out by the country in addressing and trying to cap the spread of the coronavirus. And then he was also responsible for looking at the provision of strategic direction and guidance to the appointed work streams. And those work streams are 8 in total. And then also repatriation of 114 South Africans from the city of Wuhan when the pandemic broke out, and they had to be transported from the Republic of China. And then we also looked at the formulation of a socio-economic recovery plan for the country, which will address the issues of how our economy is going to recover beyond the period of lockdown. And then we also looked at developing and consolidating a draft framework on the risk-adjusted strategy, as well as ensuring the alignment of government-wide security priorities and programs that were submitted to Cabinet. Now, Chairperson, on slide number 22 here, we talk to our key policy developments, and we draw your attention to three key policies that we want to present to you. The following progress regards the constitutional and the legislative mandates for the period that you are reporting on. The first one that we are looking at, Chairperson, is the issue of the draft military discipline bill of 2019. This bill was published by the PCD and the MV for public comments during the fourth quarter of 2019 and 2020, and it was envisaged that the draft bill will be introduced by the Minister in Parliament during the financial year 2020 to 21, and then subsequently see the implementation of this act in the DoD during the financial year 2020 and 21. So that is the first one that we are dealing with. The second one on slide number 23 is a hydrographic bill of 2018. This bill was approved by the Selected Committee on Security and Justice during December of 2019, and by the NCOP and the National Assembly on the 6th of December of 2019. And then this was submitted to the President for assent, and then continued through the parliamentary approval process during the year. It will continue through the approval process during the year 2020-21, and would be signed into law by, was signed into law by President on the 26th of May 2020, which we will see subsequent implementation in the year that will follow. That is your 2020-21 financial year. The third one, key policy development that we're drawing the portfolio committee's attention to, is the Defense Amendment Bill. Efforts to amend the Defense Act were initiated during the financial year 2015-2016, and the main objective was really to make sure that there is alignment of the Act with the current departmental requirements in order to enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of the department. This bill was published on the 11th of December in 2019 for comments before a public hearing scheduled for the fourth quarter of 2019-2020. It was then, the draft bill was to be tabled in Parliament during 2020-21. So we are still well underway in terms of dealing with this. The bill continued through the parliamentary approval process during they was signed into law by the President and gazetted on the 7th of August 2020, which will see then its implementation during the financial year that we'll be moving to, that is 2020 and 2021. Chairperson, I want to focus your attention and that of the members of the committee on the defense diplomacy. During the year under review, we had representation at the diplomatic level by residential defense attaches and in 42 countries, and that is also inclusive of the AU and the UN. On slide number 26 here, we focus our attention on the military attaché and advisor corps that are represented in South Africa. On the year under review, we had about 59 countries with defense attachés that are represented here in South Africa. Now, Chairperson, allow me to take you to part B of the report, which talks largely to the issues of performance information. And then on slide number 28 there, these are the issues we are going to touch on, and slide number 29. And I think that because we are going to be going into them into detail, I would not really take you through one by one as to what these are about. But I would rather suggest we look at slide number 20, which talks to the South African Defense Review of 2019. And here we are giving the implementation status that the DoD responded to the guidelines that were given by the President with a main focus on reprioritization and refinement of its planning, and then also trying to resolve the issues that prevent the execution of the current ordered operational commitments in the short term. And there was an intervention plan that was put on place, and its aim was to address operational performance, but also to focus on critical mission, focusing on the cross-cutting capabilities, as well as ensuring that funding flows to the defense industry and the defense-related industries, both of which remain crucial to the enablement of the defense function in future, as well as the contribution it will play to in the economy of South Africa. The Minister of Defense and Military Veterans, with the top level leadership of the department, continued to engage Parliament on the urgent and critical issues that are facing the department. The discussions continued at the level of the head of state and the Minister of Finance and National Treasury. And these were focusing on securing stable funding for the department for the medium to long-term periods. Apart from the limited number of interventions, one can say that there was little that could be done to improve the combat power of the Defense Force. The SA Defense Review 2015, sadly, has been reduced to an effort to reorganize departmental administration towards improving efficiency. And this is because of the budgetary cuts that we've had. However, we still state that work continued on the repositioning of the Defense Secretariat through a new Defense Secretariat strategy and the development of a new military strategy with its concomitant force design and force structure. If you go to page 32, there, South Africa, we are stating that we are at a critical point where a common collective understanding is required on how to plan and budget for the defense function of the Republic during this period of fiscal constraint, and agree on how collectively we can look at the prioritized interventions that still need to be pursued. If the department does not receive sustainable funding, a re-evaluation of our defense capabilities and the capacity of the department to sustain its ordered commitments means that it will have to be mandatory, and we cannot avoid that. This therefore implies that the Defense Force will have to be redesigned to fit the funding allocation that the department will get, rather than for it to be designed to be able to deliver on its constitutional obligations. And that tells how bad the situation is. Now, Chairperson, I want to draw your attention to the financial performance information. Here, what we are attempting to do is that we show that during the year under review, the DoD received an appropriation of 50.8 billion rands, which was a 4.9%, 4.93% increase from the financial year 2018-2019 appropriation. The DoD, out of what was allocated, managed to spend 99.99% of its appropriated funds and surrendered only 5.8 million to the national revenue. But of interest, Chairperson, I think the slide that you see projected there, it shows over 3 financial years how our budget has looked like. If you look at 2017-2018, we're at 48.9 billion. And then 2018-2019, we went to 48.4 billion. And then 2019, which is the year on which we are reporting, we went to 50.8 billion. And needless to say that at this point in time, indicative for 2021, we are going to be standing at 45 billion rands, and maybe we may not be able to get that. But also as we go to 2021, we are not going to be able to have an SDA to be able to do our work. Now coming to the non-financial performance information, here we are focusing on the strategic outcome-oriented outputs, and that is the non-financial performance. During the year under review, Chairperson, the DoD support to government outcomes and priorities encompass the medium-term strategic framework periods, the period from 2014 to 2019, and arranged in 14 outcomes. And the MTSF 2019 to 2014 arranged in 7 priority areas. Now, in terms of the first bullet there, on the medium-term strategic framework, that is 2014-2019, our focus was more on outcomes 3, all people in South Africa are and feel safe, and then outcomes 11, where we focus on the creation of a better South Africa that contributes to a better and safer Africa and the rest of the world. The medium-term strategic framework, however, of 2019-24, priority, it focused on priority 6, which talks up to issues of social cohesion, as well as safer communities. And then priority number 7 talks to a better Africa and a better world. In pursuance of its legislative mandate and utilizing its inherent defense capabilities, the department continued to provide support to the NDP priorities of NDP 2030 priorities that were relevant to the mandate of the department. Here, Chairperson, which we jointly responsible for the coordination of the JCPS cluster and being also the member of the joint ICTS cluster. In the medium-term strategic framework of 2014-2019, we were focusing on outcomes 3 and outcomes 11 that talk to a safer South Africa and then also a better world. And then medium-term strategic framework 2019-2024, we focus on priorities 6 and 7, which talks to the social cohesion and better Africa and the world. Now, in terms of outcomes number 3 and priority number 6, the first bullet there, we are drawing your attention to the issues around the key focus on the border management and the deployment. As you would recall, Chairperson, initially, there was a plan to deploy 22 subunits to execute resource border safeguarding through Operation Corona. And those provinces which are listed there was where those units were deployed. And then on the maritime level, we are looking at the support on Corona, where they conducted patrols along the east and the west coast of the continent. And then on the coastal patrol, also the SANDF continued its efforts to contribute towards Operation Phakisa objectives with specific reference to initiative number 5, which talks to enhance and coordinated enforcement program through the conduct of Operation Corona, the maritime coastal patrols. And then slide number 39, Chairperson, we draw your attention on where the 15 companies were deployed along our borders, so you can have a sense of where the deployment had been. And then when we go to slide number 40, here, Chairperson, we are trying to also focus on our operational success, which will vary from the recovery of weapons to the illegal foreigners that had been apprehended in our borders, to the issue of the criminals that were arrested, as well as looking on issues of precious metals that were confiscated. And then with some of our borders, we also have issues that relate to livestock theft, and then also the contrabands that were seized and confiscated. So that is what we cover on slide number 40. On outcomes number 11, Chairperson, priority number 7, we focus our deployment of our troops outside through Operation Mistral, and that is our forces that are in the DRC. Outcomes number 11, or priority number 7, here our participation and planning and execution of was more on the execution of external peace support operations, rescue operations, as well as humanitarian assistance operations. And these included, amongst others, peace support operations. Here we talk about the SANDF, continued participation in the UN peace support operation in the DRC through Operation Mistral. And then we also look at the issues of anti-piracy operations. The SANDF also continued to support the Mozambican Defense Force with anti-piracy operations in the Mozambican Channel through Operation Copper. And then the disaster aid and disaster relief, where the Defense Force provided humanitarian assistance in support of the government of Mozambique through Operation Indiza, the government of Malawi on Operation Ukunompela, and then the government of Zimbabwe, Ukuwela, due to flooding after the cyclone Edai. On slide number 43, here we are focusing on priority 11, but in support of foreign policy, the work that has been done by DOD. So here we took part in a number of peace missions, and the SANDF troops have served in UN and AU missions on the continent. We also contributed to the Foreign Intervention Brigade under the UN Resolution 2098 in order to neutralize, disarm, and prevent the expansion of all armed groups in the eastern parts of the DRC. We also participated in what we call JIM military exercise, and this is a multinational exercise which was to promote navigation and sea economic activities between South Africa, the People's Republic of China, and Russia, and executed on the west coast of South Africa between the Cape Columbine and the Cape of Good Hope during the period of 21 to 30th November 2019. And then as part of the DOD's defense diplomacy, we also focus our key efforts on the African states and as our strategic partners. The DOD remained committed to have the defense attaches deployed to support the government objectives. To this extent, Chairperson and members of the committee, the DOD deployed 10 defense attaches in the SADC region in Angola, Botswana, the DRC, Lesotho, Mozambique, Namibia, Eswatini, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. I now draw your attention to our departmental performance. Here we are giving our analysis of our performance indicators. The DOD is reporting against 78 performance indicators, which are consisting of 140 targets for the year under review 2019 and 2020. The first one we break down in terms of the organs of state, the Defense Secretariat, and the SANDF. And then the second circle there, we break down in terms of each services, how many indicators each of the services have. And then the last one, we break down all the targets in terms of the quarters for starting from Q1 to Q4. And that brings us to a total of 140. The next slide here, Chairperson, I think that we are happy and proud to state that we don't have any red color here, because if we did, then it would have indicated that we would have performed below 40%, and that's why we don't have any red. So we have the yellow which then indicates that our performance were between 40 and 80, which is quite significant. And then the green one, it signifies the areas where we performed between 80 and 100. So those are the indicators that we are showing there. On slide number 48, Chairperson, here we are trying to cover and show the members of the portfolio committee over the MTSF period, that if you look on the extreme right for the year under review, you would see that we have actually performed. This has been, if you take the MTSF, that this was the best performance year that we had as defense over the 5-year period. Our achievement stands at about 73%. And then you would also see that when you look at the column of those that we have not been achieved, that it is at the lowest at 21%. And we do believe, of course, that in future we can do even better. And then there at the bottom, then you have the graph there that shows in green, which is what we have achieved. And then in red, what we have not been able to achieve. And then the gray is the shade of what the total performance for the year would have been. On slide number 49, Chairperson, we show that some of the targets that we have, 5 of those were over 90%. 5 were also between 70 and 90% in terms of achievement. And then seven of those were between 50 and 70. And then 4 of those were around 50%. Now here, Chairperson, here we are drawing your attention to our performance targets that we did not achieve. If you look at slide number 15, and then if you look at the last 2 columns, that our annual target was set at 100, and then percentage of achievement is 90. So on this column, we are focusing on those areas where our achievement was 90 and above. So with very little that we did not achieve. And then on slide number 51, we then look at those ones, the ones that we didn't achieve, and then we are focusing on 90% and less. So this slide, it takes us from 90% to 71%. And then on slide number 52, we focus on those ones that we didn't achieve, but focusing from 67% to 50%. And then lastly, we have those ones, the ones that are covered from 43% to 0%. In terms of the performance indicators, Chairperson, we want to state that the DOD selected performance indicators that are derived from the defense mandate and form the basis of the department's budget allocation from National Treasury. These indicators that we have below here represent the largest cost drivers in the department are included in the E&E. And you would see that where we didn't achieve is those ones that talk to the hours that are spent at sea and the hours that are flown. Now on page number 56, Chairperson, here we are focusing on the South African Air Force. And then this is about the number of joint interdepartmental and interagency and multilateral military exercises that were conducted between 2015 and 16 and 2020. Here, the 5-year target was achieved during 2018-2019 with an additional exercise done for 2019 and 2020. The slide beneath Chairperson talks to the number of landward subunits deployed on border safeguarding per year, and that is also for 2015, 2016, and then 2019, 2020, the 15 companies that we talked to earlier on. But here we also want to say that the 15 subunits that were deployed per year over the strategic period of the execution of Operation Corona were in those provinces that we talked about a little bit earlier on. The slide on number 57 talks also to the slides, the number of hours flown per year, also 2015, 2016, and 2019, 2020. And there you would see that what we didn't achieve is reflected in red, and then and the target is the one that we had set in black. And there are instances, for instance, where, for instance, in the year currently, you would see that the target that we had set, it was slightly not achieved. On the right column there, in different shades of green, we are focusing your attention on the performance indicator as was adjusted 2018 and 2019 to include the number of force preparation for hours flown per year. And we think that the force preparation exceeded the hours that were anticipated in terms of the preparation. This slide, Chairperson, slide number 58, it is focusing on the Navy. And here again, the shades, the black being the target, and then the red being what we didn't achieve, and then what we didn't achieve. And then also on the right, we focus also on the force preparation. And then of course, I think that some of the targets that were not achieved, it was also due to the issues of the refit and the frigates and the submarines that we needed to look at. On slide number 59, here, sorry, 59, here we focus on military skills and the attaché offices. Here the MSDS system endeavor to compensate for the attrition rate of the military members. And you would see that on the top left, there we are focusing on the number of military skills development members in the system for the 5-year period. And then on the right, we are looking at the number of the reserve force man days. And then also the reserve force man days increased since 2017 to 2018 because of an increase in requirement of deployment and the reserve force members. And then the one at the bottom, Chairperson, is an average of 44 defense attaché offices per year were in place over the strategic period, of which SADC had 10 offices, the rest of Africa 13, and the rest of the 21 offices were in the rest part of the world. On slide number 60, Chairperson, here it is a selected performance indicator summary. And then here we are drawing your attention to our internal and external efforts and operations on the border safeguarding. And you would know that some of those are also largely dependent on the taskings that we get. We also looked at the issues of the disaster aid and relief, general military assistance, and the defense support operations. And then we looked as well on the issues of safety and security, and then search and rescue. And then you would see where we stand in terms of the financial year under review. And then of course here, part of the issues were the challenges that we had with the requirements that we had on the deployment. And then the percentage of compliance with the Southern African Development Community Standby Force, here you would see that we have done extremely well. I think we achieved 100%. So I think that covers all the performance indicators. Now, on the issues of governance, Chairperson, I draw your attention to slide number 63. The DOD, through the leadership of the accounting officer as the head of the department, is committed to good governance over the establishment of systems and processes which will ensure achievement of organizational strategic objectives. The DOD also established and endorsed the Accountability Management Committee, also the Audit Management Forum, and the audit management team, as some of the forums are responsible to manage internal control deficiencies of the department. Various governance, risk, and compliance structures are implemented within the respective services and division processes of control, monitoring, and accountability. Now on slide number 64, Chairperson, here we draw the attention of the meeting to the DoD enterprise risks. And here we have listed 6, and then some of them, I think there are issues that we are still dealing with. The issue of the deterioration of the DoD facilities and infrastructure. And you would know that here we are dealing with the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure on the issues of devolution. And then the second one talks to the issues of the outdated and probably non-integrated DoD ICTS. And then we also have the prevalence in fraud and corruption that we are dealing with. And these are the risks that we have identified within the department. There is also the issue of high prevalence on DoD of litigation in the department, and then also forfeited rights on DoD property. And then you know here that we have dealt with the issues of the challenges of land claim, and then the compromised defense direction due to the lack of the financial resources. So the DoD has not been able to mitigate all these risks, but satisfactorily during the period under review. And the efforts to continue with the mitigation measures are ongoing. Part D of our annual report, Chairperson, focuses on the human resource management. And then here, I want to draw your attention to slide number 67. And then during the period under review, the DoD continued to deliver on its legislative mandate in support of the work of the government and its imperatives. The department is also challenged in as far as the annual compensation of employee allocation goes, as it exceeded the ceiling. The most prominent challenge is that the COE allocation received presupposes a reduction of the personnel capacity to fit within the appropriate allocation. And I think that all we can say is that what you see here is still work in progress, and we are working on that, as we will be presenting, I think, at the beginning of the next quarter. Numerous engagements between the DoD and the National Treasury have taken place, amongst others, to resolve the impasse, and these have since not delivered any viable solution. The department's position is to maintain an average HR capacity of 75,500, recruit according to attrition, and utilize the 2.6 million reserve force man days. For the reporting period, Chairperson, we want to state that the department planned an average of 74 of the capacity of 74,901. And as of the 31st March 2020, which was the end of the financial year, our average HR capacity was 74,096. The COE allocation for the financial year 2019-2020 was 29.1 billion. And the required HR budget is 32 billion, which was in line with the planned HR capacity for the financial year. Now, the financial year ending that ended 31st March 2020, the final HR expenditure was 31.8 billion, which constitutes 0.91% deviation between the projected HR costs and the final HR expenditure. Therefore, in this financial year under consideration, a 2.6 budget shortfall occurred when it comes to the issues of the COE. We also talked to a decrease in the expenditure regarding the utilization of consultants. We recorded this, the consultant on a year-on-year basis. And then this has saved us an amount of 76 million rands in financial year 2018-2019, and then 4.4 million in 2019-2020, which is in a bit of a significant reduction. Now, in terms of Part E, our focus here, it is on the financial information, which will be constituted by the accounting officer's report, as well as the report of the Auditor General to Parliament. And that happened on that was dated on the 12th of November. And then also our audited consolidated annual financial statements. Now, in terms of the Auditor General's outcomes for the year ended 31st March, here one wants to state that we were not qualified in terms of the performance information, which was evaluated in accordance with the criteria developed from the performance management and reporting framework. There were no material findings raised on the usefulness of the reliability of the reported performance information for the following program, which is Program 2 for First Employment. Now, here we then, Chairperson, focus the committee's attention to the basis for qualification. Here we have 3 areas where we want to draw your attention to. The first one being the goods and services and investment. This one, Chairperson, we received a qualified opinion because it has to do with the sensitive projects and then also certain aspects of the SDA. What was of interest, Chairperson, we tried to look as the department as to what is the percentage of the total budget that goes to sensitive projects, and that is 0.9%. That goes to sensitive projects, and 0.027% if you take into the SDA. So here the issue that is raised is the issue of about 182 million that is reflected. The second one, it is the issue where we have qualification, is the one that talks to the irregular expenditure. And then here, I think that previously, we used to have the irregular expenditure of about 7.9 billion. And then out of the current year that we are looking at, 2.8 billion irregular expenditure was incurred for 2019-2020. And out of these 2.6 was for the compensation of employees, which is that amount. And then this was due to a reduction imposed by National Treasury through budget reduction on actual employees in the services of the DOD. And then the difference, which is 230 million, was incurred due to contracts that were awarded through unfair bidding processes from previous years, which are still running and paid for in the financial year that is under review. Now here, Chairperson, in slide number 76, we draw your attention to the issue of the material irregularities. Here we are dealing with 3 of them. The first one being the inventory and asset management contract that was not awarded not only to the bidder that scored the highest points in the evaluation process. The contract was not awarded to the company with the highest points. It was awarded to 2 companies on a 50-50 basis. And then the total value of the contract is 922 million. And then out of that, 451 million was paid at the end of the financial year. And then the second issue we draw your attention to is the one on the lease payments that were made for unoccupied offices in one of our structures. The initial lease started in 2015, full occupation only in January 2020 for the 5 buildings. So an amount of 108 million was paid when buildings were not fully utilized. And then the third immaterial irregularity that is erased was the issue of the unfair awarding for the supply of the fuel. The issue here has to do with the contract for supply of jet fuel. The pricing was set at 11 rands 32 cents and 13 rands 84 cents. The award finally made to supplier who charged 33 cents more per liter for 1 million liters of fuel. And this was due to the change in the mode of transport that was used, which moved from initially the thought was that they will utilize the rail, and then they ended up utilizing the road. And that's why then we incurred the loss of 2.5 million, which is because of the issue of the transport not being foreseen. Chairperson, before I conclude, I just want to state that with all these issues that we have raised that talk to the material irregularity and some of the ones where we were qualified, that we have also instituted investigations internally, and these have continued, and we have also made our submissions and to the Auditor General and also to the National Treasury on all these issues. So Chairperson, this concludes my input, and I submit to the committee our audited 2019 annual report. I submit.
Thank you very much, SecDef. Very comprehensive presentation, and you were able to do it within time. And the good thing is that in doing that, you did not miss anything critical.
Yes.
Thank you so much for that. Colleagues, the matter now is on the table for discussion. You may then take off the presentation so that I can see the colleagues. Thank you so much. Right. Yes, let me just look at the hands. Is that Knight and the...
Yeah, Cobus Murray.
Cobus Murray. Mr. Murray? You may come in. Yes, sir.
Can I start, sir? Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, SecDef. This was your first annual report, and we certainly welcome that. We know it is also probably your, let's call it your honeymoon annual report, because this is the last time that you will report on someone else's performance and not your own. So we will be very lenient on you. However, from our side, we wish you best, and we know that often a new broom sweeps clean. So we have got huge expectations of you and your performance and your team. Chairperson, I want to start off by really what comes in relatively early in your presentation, and that's on the strategic overview, and it deals specifically with a special defense account. And that's a major concern of ours, because as you rightfully said, in the next financial year, there will be nothing in the SDA. And we have raised this many times as a huge concern, that we will either not provide for capital acquisition and strategic prime mission equipment, and that we will have no allocation for that. So my question on the SDA is obviously in terms of how we will replace that, whether you've got an answer for us, whether it will just be an ordinary allocation in the budget, whether it will be to the general defense account, or whether something else will replace that. I'm sure that you know that the problem with the cost of employees to a large extent was covered from money that was withdrawn from the SDA in at least 2 financial years. So that has depleted that SDA to a large extent to the benefit of the cost of employees. Can you indicate to us, how that will be dealt with going into the future? And then specifically your major acquisition projects on landward and maritime forces that you've said is under threat, whether you can give us an indication. You might recall at the Lekgotla, I have asked the CFO whether we've got money, the department has got money for Byron Hotel, at least for Byron Hotel. We know that both projects are in advanced stage, and we know that the first vessel of Byron will be delivered or ready for delivery early next year. It seems like Armscor is of the opinion the money is there, but it seems like it's not with them. The CFO of DOD has said, you haven't got the money, but it seems like somewhere there must be money. So maybe you must just assist us that I can at least understand how you intend to fund those projects and the commitments on those projects, because we must remember there are government guarantees and there are penalties that will kick in if we cannot stick to that. Also, how will on that same page, you have indicated that 21-22, there might be no budget for Armscor. Now, if there are no budget for Armscor, that is a major concern, because notwithstanding the project that has decreased dramatically, there are certain operational costs at Armscor. Now, if that is the case, how will we deal with that? Because that is most certainly serious acquisition concerns of mine and of the committee, I'm sure. Then, in your overview, you've also given indication of the defense review, and you further on later on, talked about the defense review. Now, we know that the 2015 defense review is a wonderful ideological policy document, but we know that it's totally unsustainable and it cannot be funded. We have seen that. I've experienced that from the previous parliament, and we still see the same trend as that, and that is downwards. So to keep on, that the 2015 defense review is the outcome that we need. We know that it cannot be funded, and we know that economic growth and development is not there. So how will you deal with that specific challenge that we know that the policy document that we've got is not going to give us the outcome that we require? I just want to ask you on the military attachés. We are represented in a number of countries, 21 outside Africa. That is a huge cost, and you know the cost of keeping our military attachés abroad. How can we really justify that? To keep so many in I'm sure countries that we've got little or no military relationships with. If that is not the case, then obviously I would appreciate if at one stage you can brief us on the justification of having so many military attachés abroad, while we don't know whether there's any value in for us, basically in terms of the funding as well. I would also appreciate, not tonight, but eventually maybe next year, if you can brief us on the reasons why there are 59 foreign military attachés in South Africa. I suspect it's because of the strategic positioning of South Africa on the Atlantic and the Pacific, or the Atlantic and the Indian Oceans. But I would appreciate that also at one stage, because that is of strategic very, very importance. Then I certainly want to ask you about a number of things. And that specifically deals with the qualifications in the audit report. We have been told by the Auditor General that there are also poor management, control, and oversight in the Department of Defense. When they reported to us on the Department of Defense, Armscor, and the other entities, Department of Defense was the one that stood out negatively and very poor. And I think that we all expressed our concerns that is a reflection on the Department of Defense, notwithstanding your justifications or even the reasons for the qualifications. How can we change that? and how can we get that accountability and good governance back. Then I'm just going to touch on 2 targets, because normally I'm not very with all these tick box targets where you achieve 100% and 99%, and then when you look at what is happening at the bottom of the ladder, then you see that we cannot really deliver, and our spending on equipment and operations are decreasing every year, which is actually what the Defence Force is all about. Specifically 2 that I have picked up where we have not achieved, and that is, first of all, the training in the Air Force and the training in the Navy. I mean, if we do not do training, then we cannot be prepared for anything that happens to South Africa. And I've indicated, you know, our shores, which is of importance, obviously, to other countries. Then in terms of the sea hours and the flying hours as well, there's a constant drop every single year. Even if you look at your one target where it was 94% the flying hours, but if you compare that to the previous 2 years, then you see there's been a major drop in hours allocated, and still we cannot achieve that. So that is of a major concern to me, and obviously I will need your answer to that. My last point, Chairperson, will be on the criteria for the irregular expenditure. Why was that contract not awarded to the company with the highest points? Certainly, if you can give us an indication of type of contract, maybe you cannot give us all the details. Maybe it's sensitive, I don't know. But if you can give us an indication also of then the money spent, because if it was not the highest points, you know, why was it then split between 2 others, and how did the cost compare because of that? And we know that if that is not properly answered, you know, it will be a reflection in the next audit as well. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murray. Let me recognize Miss Beukers. Her hand was up long time ago. After Ms. Beukers, I will then come back to SecDef.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, SecDef, with our oversight visit this weekend, we saw a lot of old vehicles. What is the process, or do you have a plan, for example, to auction some of those vehicles? Because in your 2019 report, in your 2020 report, you indicated the equipment was not sold due to an auctioneer not being appointed. And the same excuse was used in your 2019 report. So how far is the process of the appointment of an auctioneer? Then secondly, Chair, there's somewhere that they report that the Defence Force will have to be redesigned to fit its funding allocation and not its constitutional obligations. I want to hear from the SecDef, Chair, what will the impact of such redesignment be on service delivery? And what is the process or the engagement in the department on the possibility and the impact of possible redesignment? My last one, Chair, is with the current financial constraints and the need for border safeguarding. Will the SANDF be able to continue to do both border deployment and external deployment over the medium term? Or should we not perhaps stop the external deployment and focus on border safeguarding until our finances and our capabilities allow for larger and external deployment? Oh, Chair, there's a last one. On the targets, I don't know if I understand it correctly, but on disciplinary cases, they achieved only 10%. So why is the achievement so low on the disciplinary cases, Chair? Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Over to Sakdev.
And let me thank also Mr. Mare for the kind words. Chairperson, I think that under the strategic review on the SDA, I think as we know that in the past, we've also used the SDA to deal with some of the shortfall that we had for the COE. And then it also got cut. So at this point in time, as we move into the next financial year, we are also moving there with almost nothing that is left. So what is going to be key for the department, we are really going to be largely relying on our general defense account. And then, of course, we do have quite a bit of money, but I would allow the CFO to talk to that because with some of these strategic acquisitions that we are doing, because of the process for procurement that takes a while, what we have done is that we have asked for some of the money to be rolled over to the next financial year so that then we are able to finalize some of those projects that we are supposed to finalize, our strategic acquisition projects that I think Mr. Mare had spoken about. Then Chairperson, part of the money that we have had rolled out is the money that we have been asked by the colleagues from AMSCO that they will not be able to utilize all the money before the end of the financial year, and that we needed to approach the Treasury so that then we can have that money rolled out. However, the point that we are trying to emphasize, Chairperson, is that for our main strategic acquisition, we really relied on the special defense account. And with it now not going to be almost existent in the next financial year, it therefore makes it difficult for us to do our strategic acquisition. However, the money that is going to be rolled over, we will use it to the extent where it is possible to finalize the projects. But after that, we are not guaranteed that. But also, Chairperson, let me say that as we go and rely on the general defense account, at this point in time, our budget for the next financial year is set at 45 billion. And it is important that we indicate that this is indicative. It could be that by the time the financial year starts on the 1st of April, that we may not even receive that 45 billion. And we would have moved, as I indicated as well, that this year under review that we are reporting on, we had a budget of 50.8 billion. And now we are going to be having a budget of 45 billion. So already from last year's financial year that we are accounting on, we have lost already 5 billion. And you can imagine also, even in terms of our own strategic acquisition, what that would mean. And that now is coming from the GDA without actually making any reference to the SDA. And I think that this begins to send the message of how how grim the picture looks. And of course, the question is that what happens then to AMSCO in 2022 when we are not able to actually have the kind of budget that we want. Chairperson, one of the things we are all trying to grapple with is then to say, how do we go back to the drawing board and find ways of how we can deal with this? At least at the AMSCO level, they do have some of the projects that they are looking at where they can generate income. But this issue, Chairperson, of the finances, I just want to emphasize to say that it has a cascading effect. And like we have mentioned in the past, that the DOD has been the main client, for instance, even if you take an industry, a company like Denel. So if we are not buying, we know what the situation of Denel is. And then we also know that if Denel doesn't exist, we also are saying basically, is Armscor going to survive that? So that's why it is incumbent that we are able to find as a way of how we can resolve this. Chairperson, the Defense Review implementation, as we have mentioned, it is a very good document with lofty ideas and with a good idea as to where we want to see ourselves as the as the Department of Defense, but also how we want the Department of Defense to ideally look like. However, all these things, for them to be implemented, they require the fund. And I think that throughout the presentation, the common thread was the unavailability of money. That's why even when we talk about what do you call it? The force, the type of force that we are going to end up having the type of force that will be covered by the budget that we are given, rather than have a force that is able to carry out its constitutional mandate. And that is the reality that we are facing. If we don't have the money, some of even the constitutional mandates that we are supposed to fulfill are going to be very difficult to fund. Chairperson, there was a question around the 21 military attaches. Even with the work that we are doing as defense, we base whatever we do on our also foreign policy. And it is correct, like that we said that Africa is the center, at the center of our foreign policy, but that doesn't mean that we should not have defense attaches that are deployed to other countries that are strategic to South Africa, but that fall outside the continent. And if you actually look, we have 49 attaches, and if you take all our embassies, we have about 126. So a bigger part of the embassies that we have do not have any attaches that are covered. Here in South Africa, we did say that we have 59. I will not be in a position to explain why, because then we get requested by the countries to deploy their people here. It is not necessarily on a reciprocal basis. There would be attaches that are here, but we don't have representation in their countries, because any country that deploys, you deploy based on the countries that you perceive them as being strategic to you achieving your own goals as the country. So I think that is what the issue is. Now, Chairperson, yes, we if you look, we have moved from about 6 qualifications to 2 qualifications, and that has taken a lot of work. But also one of the things is that, which is very glaring, is that in this audit that had just been concluded, we didn't have any qualifications around asset management. And what we are aiming to do is to continue with the good work to make sure that we keep up that record. It's the first time that we are having that. However, Chairperson, I think, yes, there is a valid question that has been asked that the controls are poor. We do have controls in place, but part of those who implement those controls are human beings. And then what we are seeking to do is that as we tighten controls, it means that we also have to tighten our efforts to exercise consequence management where it is needed. And with all these investigations that are doing, we are hoping that they will point us to the right direction where consequence management needs to be taken. But one of the things that we are trying to do is that if you see, Chairperson, most of the issues that we are qualified on and where there is material irregularity, all of them has to do largely around the issues of procurement. And probably we are the only government department amongst many that where we do not have supply chain management residing under the office of the Chief Financial Officer. Now, part of what we are doing is try and see how we can redesign, for lack of a better word, how we deal with our procurement. As you would know, most of it is very decentralized. And sometimes because of that, it becomes very difficult to exercise control. But one of the things that we are also doing is that with an audit committee that is in place, one of the things that we are seeking to do, as directed by the accounting officer is the person that accounts, but also Section 45 of PFMA, it says that all managers must manage the resources that are given to them. So one of the things that we are trying to do is that when we have audit committee members, the heads of the services must be there, because they are given budgets and they are given resources, which is both human resources as well as financial resources, so that then when we sit on a quarterly basis, they are able to account for the resources that they had been given for that particular quarter. Because if we are not going to adopt that approach, Chairperson, it means that if you then say that the accounting officer is going to be there, people will be reckless, because then they will not be held accountable for that. And we think that doing things in a different way will help us. It will be difficult because it's a new thing that we are trying to implement, but we think that in the long term, it will serve us well to try and deal with these issues, because even with them at in their areas, they will have to make sure that controls that are in place are respected. And also they would be the ones who will point us to the right direction to say, where do we need to strengthen some of our controls. And so, Chairperson, I think that we have done quite a number of investigations. Some of them we have, as I mentioned, we have submitted. And then even with some of these issues that have to talk to the material irregularity, we have acted on them. And the issues are not only looked in terms of conducting the investigations, some of the issues are with the law enforcement agencies, so that where the criminal system, justice system has to kick in, that will kick in. However, they will also point to us where consequence management needs to be dealt with. Let me at this stage, Chairperson, maybe hand over to the CFO to address some of the finance questions that have been asked.
Thank you. Thank you.
Come this side.
Thank you, Chairperson. The issue of the SDA, we all know that in 2021, the budget of the SDA, it won't be available, but we are still engaging with National Treasury with the hope that it might come. But to be precisely, as we all know that each and every project are not going at the same level. So whatever savings that we'll have in other projects, it means we need to focus to Biro and hotel. I think Mr. Murray asked this question before to say how we're going to fund Biro and hotel, because they are at the stage where they nearly been finalized. So we will able to make sure that whatever savings that we'll have on that, because remember, in terms of the SDA, we are allowed to roll over funds. Whatever that it won't be spent there, we'll try to focus to make sure that Biro and hotel get funded. Chairperson, I need to highlight this. We, as a department, we are in a very quagmire situation here, because as SecDef indicated that in the past, we used to take funds from the SDA and fund the compensation of employees. Right now, if you look at it, compensation of employees, it's underfunded by 3 billion. So whatever happened under a GTA, we will no longer able to take anything from the SDA, because SDA is meant for the certain projects. So those funds will be used under the SDA. But if we do that environment from one project to another, we will able to come and report to the portfolio committee, because we need to make a report to National Treasury for all the deviation that we made for all the environment. And also I need to highlight, Chairperson, that whatever environment that we'll do according to law in terms of Section 43 of the PFMA. That's what it will happen. We will not just do the environment as we please. The other area, Chairperson, that SecDev also covered in terms of the internal controls. As a department, we are trying by all means to implement all the internal controls, as SecDev indicated that in the past, in the last financial year, 2018-19 financial year, we had 6 qualifications. We managed to put all the controls around the assets in order to make sure that we are no longer getting the qualification. In the same token, Chairperson, if you look in terms of the qualification as of now, it's around the irregular expenditure, around the procurement section. In order for us to deal with that, we need to make sure that we implement the consequence management, of which SecDev as of now, as she was explaining, we already started already. Some of the cases are sitting with the MPs. We got case numbers there to say what is actually happening. So I think, Chairperson, the only way to fight this is to implement the strong measures in order to make sure that these things are happening. Thank you, Chairperson.
Chairperson, can I just, I think I have 2 issues that I left out. There was a question about the old vehicles that needed to be auctioned. Maybe the CFO can.
Chairperson, we're fully aware about number of vehicles that needed to be auctioned. If I can take it, Chairperson, you might remember that we engaged the team that it's busy going through to all the vehicles at the moment to fix the vehicles. So after this whole project, you will find that those ones that are not really needed, Log Division will advertise to say those one is the one that needed to be auctioned. But at this point in time, you will find that some of these vehicles, it still can be fixed and then get into road. So at the moment, once that project finishes, Chairperson, we will come back to you and then to say, this is the number of vehicles that will be advertised. We're fully aware that we need to auction some of the vehicles, but we can't just auction before we make sure that defense does not need those vehicles. I don't know if I covered some. Yeah.
Yes. But also, Chairperson, I think that what is important to mention is that in terms of assets, it's what we are trying to do as well is that the owners of the assets must, as and when necessary, do away with the assets that they no longer need, because for as long as they remain in the asset register, whether they are obsolete or not, it means once they are in the register, we have to continue accounting for them. So those are some of the things that we are also going to try to implement.
They remain on your balance sheet?
No. We are talking about I was talking to the issue of the disposal of vehicles, because those are part of your assets, but we are saying that on an ongoing basis, the owners of assets must get rid of the assets that are no longer needed, because then also at the end of the day, we account for assets that we are not necessarily using. And then there was a question about training that was asked by Mr. Mare. I just wanted to say that we had a target that we had set, and then we achieved 80 of that in as far as the Navy. And that was because 159 of the learners were not successful and in completing their training. And then with the Air Force, 113 additional learners successfully completed their training, and the measurement of actual achievement is performed in relation to the full population, which is 857 learners. Chairperson, there was a question about why we have so many cases that remain unresolved. The issue here is that we had challenges in it, particularly when it comes to people we would utilize as the chair of these hearings and the departmental representatives that we had. We just felt that we didn't have sufficient that were well trained to be able to deal with this. And that in itself has had a cascading effect in the sense that it became very difficult to finalize some of these cases, but it's a matter that we're going to continue to look into.
There was also a question on redesigning the force, the defense force to fit the budget. That's the constitutional mandate, and what impact will that have on going forward? And the second question was, given the financial situation, are you considering, focusing on internal deployment to the exclusion of external deployment until this financial situation changes? Those are the two other questions.
Chair.
Yes, Ms. Biggers.
Chair, maybe just on the response from the CFO on the vehicles. I don't understand that they changed now, Chair, because in the 2020 report, they indicate the reason why the vehicles was not sold was because of an auctioneer not being appointed. That was the reason that they give 2019 and 2020. And then also, Chair, on the disciplinary cases, I don't agree with the answer from the SecDef, because the AG raised that evidence for consequence management could not be obtained. And I think that's the reason why there's a problem with the finalization of the disciplinary cases. Thank you, Chair.
Yes. SecDef, just look at those two questions that the honorable member is raising.
Yes.
Maybe it may be that on the consequence management issue, the unresolved cases, you gave a high level presentation, but it remains a concern that the AG has raised in a number of years. Yeah.
Yes, and I agree with that, Chairperson, that we acknowledge as a department that we could have done a better job in terms of consequence management. And it's one of those things that we are looking at, and then also trying to hold the managers accountable, because in all the structures, you have different layers of management that also have the powers to actually exercise consequence management on those that fall below account to them when there is wrongdoing. So I think that we acknowledge the point. We are starting to do something about it, and we are hoping that even maybe through some of our quarterly reports, we will be able to share with yourself what it is that we are doing. Chairperson, the issue of the redesign on the force, the question was whether we'll redesign or that we needed to explain why we say the redesign of force will be based on financial ability rather than on constitutional mandate. It is the situation in which we find ourselves. I think we do have an idea of where we want to be reflected in the Defense Act, as well as in the defense review. However, all those, for them to happen, we will need to have the financial resources to do so. And whatever financial resources we have, we can work only on the basis of that. So that's why we say that there will be a risk that we will not have a force that is equipped to deliver on the constitutional mandate because of the lack of resources, but we can only have with what our financial resources can afford. We can also, Chairperson, I think on some of these things, submit additional responses in writing to the committee with more details.
Thank you.
On the issue of the consideration of internal deployment versus external deployment, considering budget cut, Cabinet made a decision that based on taskings by the President. So we also then respond on the basis of those taskings that we are getting. If we don't get any, then we will not deploy really, because then we can only now respond to the taskings rather than do what we think would have been done ordinarily.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Secretary.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Secretary, I'm happy that you are attending to the misalignment within your departmental structure.
Yes.
It was very strange that supply chain would not report to CFO. I think it's under Chief Logs, and understand that he is not an accountant. I'm not saying that we need accountants, but the PFMA is very clear when it comes to issues of finances, and where procurement and stroke SCM should result. I found it very strange that it was not within it was not under the CFO. And the second point is risk. And the risk is under planning and
yes.
Yeah, it's under planning. And I think Dr. Kamede, if I'm not mistaken. And the AG says the department does not investigate risk sufficiently. In other words, there was just no will. And in your document, you've listed all the risk areas. And these are matters that have attracted adverse findings from the Auditor General year after year. And we have not been able to deal with it. Where should risk management be located in reality? I mean, you're not the only, I mean, you look at other departments and how they do it. But until the department plans around risk and is able to mitigate it, forget it. You'll continue receiving these repeat findings from the Auditor General. The sooner you deal with the issue of risk and where it is, risk management and where it is located, and the SCM as where it's located, and these problems are not going to go away. And two, is to prevent preventative controls. You know, it's something that must be there, because the problem to investigate, you know, non-compliance becomes expensive. Becomes expensive when you should have instituted controls right from the beginning to ensure that you prevent, non-compliance, as it were. So I think I'm happy that you are looking in that direction. And the other point the AG raised, he says, I said it when I was asked to comment elsewhere. He says, you know, the accounting officer does not respond with required agency to our message, to our call to address risk and improve internal controls. I mean, it was there in the previous financial state, in the previous report, 1819. Again, is in the 1920, what you call a financial audit report. And it looks as though there has been no will to address these matters. But now that you are raising these matters, I'm happy to leave it at that. And because you've actually hit the head on the nail in your address to this evening. And my last point is it is true that you have reduced the qualification areas from 6 to 2, right? And but your irregular expenditures keep going up, and it concerns us that you have not even started regularizing the irregular expenditure. Instead, you keep accumulating them. But you said you have the team. I think it was reported in one meeting, and that is investigating, but it's taking too long. I mean, sometimes. I mean, if a tender was awarded, I mean, there was tender, and X was the highest, what you call a bidder, and then it gets awarded to A and B. Why must it take 2 months to investigate that? It's even worse, a year. I mean, really, because the officials the paper trail is there. Why must it take so long to investigate it? So that's the reason why sometimes we get the feeling that there is no will to investigate. If there's no will to investigate, to launch investigation into these irregular expenditures, it means that there will be no consequence management. So they're not, most of the cases, SecDef, are not complicated.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm happy that you are attending to it. And those were my comments, SecDef. You may not, comment on them, but because we are together and they will be dealing with these matters. But that's my feeling, sitting where I'm sitting, that for as long as the misalignment continues in your own structure, we'll keep having these problems. What I'm picking up from your presentation, so if SCM is there is controlled in the chief logs, and they will tell you that no, there's a military court or military police that are investigating it, because civilians are not, I guess, they can't investigate, soldiers. So it means that you are completely barred from crossing the line. Even on matters that should not be there in the first place. The functions should not be there in the first place, should be on this other side of the line. So you can't. They will keep telling you that no, the military police are investigating it. And the matter is being taken to the military court. And but the judge is not sitting, or there's no presiding officer, and so on and so forth. You're an accounting officer, but when it comes to those matters, you'll be a lame duck until you take a decision on these matters and take full control where you have the mandate by law. You keep on being hamstrung. That will be my comment. Over to you, SecDef.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. If I may address myself maybe to two of the issues, I think that, Chairperson, I agree with the views that you've mentioned. Our risk management, you correct, it's located in the policy unit, and then it's only 4 people. For a department that has an HR capacity that is over 73,000. So clearly that is not sufficient, Chairperson. In most departments, the chief, they will even have what they call a chief risk officer, which is a chief director position. Now, a chief risk, when you have a chief risk office, what they will do, they will go to the various areas. The people who work on the issues, for instance, if you take the Air Force, they will know what are their areas of risks, identify them, and develop your mitigating measures. Because when you mitigate, then you will see that when the internal auditors come, then all whatever would have been risk is mitigated. And when AG comes, they look at what the internal auditors have said. So if you also have a chief risk office, it means that the office itself will have to be audited even by our own internal auditors. So to a large extent, when you have a properly staffed risk office, it also plays a role of preventive measures, because then you are able to avert a situation that can go badly. And the people who can only do that are the people who do the work there. For instance, if you are in procurement, you know what the risk areas are, and you start to single them out and then say, how are we going to mitigate that? If it is the controls, you focus on that. And then also, Chairperson, I agree with the issue of the irregular expenditure. If you see them, these irregular expenditure are historical in nature. But what the problem is that even though some of those contracts were not awarded properly, they were never cancelled. So you can have a deal that was awarded in 2015, but if in 2016, 2017 you pay, 2017, 2018 you pay, then every year you pay, then it continues to reflect as an irregular expenditure because you have spent money in that particular year to pay for what was even not awarded appropriately. Maybe, Chairperson, we can give you a bit of comfort, albeit it being late, that we do have also the SIU that is investigating some of these issues. We also have the DPCI, the crimes unit that is also contacting us on some of these issues. Yes, some, as you correctly pointed out, our military police and then our Inspector General investigated some of those. So with some of those that have been investigated by SIU, we have been able to recover part of the money. Now the DPCI, what they are doing, they are now pursuing the same, but using the criminal justice system to say recovery of the money in itself is not sufficient, but also those ones that have been involved, they must be brought to book. But even with that, Chairperson, you will see that there are others, their role may have been minor, that still should have been dealt with through consequence management within the department. But those are some of the things where one is directing efforts and trying to see how best we can deal with these ones. But I do subscribe to the view that you've raised. And of course, if we are to even grow our risk management component, it means that we'll need to have resources. Maybe we have to see some of the posts that are funded, maybe we shift them to actually build on this, because I think that it is a structure that will serve us well in future.
No, thank you very much, Secretary. Colleagues, are there any other questions?
Just from me, if I may. Just in terms of a response to the Secretary's response answers and that of the CFO. I'm glad he's given us an indication on how he intends or plan to fund Byron Hotel. It obviously implies that he's going to apply the principle of steal from Peter to pay Paul. And I mean, my concern is which other projects will now be impacted by that old policy to save from other projects to pay for Byron Hotel. And whether that is going to be sustainable, because remember, there's going to be 3 inshore patrol vessels, of which the first one is going to be delivered early next year. And then we know that I think Hotel, the hydrographic vessel, is planned to be delivered in 22, 23. So there's going to be commitment in that regard. I am just very, very concerned and see that as a major threat to the Defence Force, because remember, if the budget is going to be 45 billion next year, and if the cost of employees are not contained or cut, that means that we can get to a spending of cost of employees of over 70%. That means that there's going to be very little money for operations and going to be no money for equipment. And I mean, we have seen over the last weekend a small portion of the needs and requirements in the Defence Force. And then we're going to see the pauper striking the fan very, very hard. So we sit with a short-term problem that can be that can cause a major explosion within the next 2 financial years. And obviously, you know, SecDef is not a popular task that you've got on your hand and an easy task, but somehow you will have to help us and maybe report the beginning of next year on how you intend that this can be curbed, because it needs to be sustainable and we need to be a Defence Force. And I'm just very, very concerned that this is going to cause many, many, many problems going forward. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Mare. SecDef, I'm not inviting you to respond to the question today. And he's aware that we are dealing with matters ex post facto.
Yes.
So it's next year, you must be ready to deal with this question when we deal with the budget. Yes. When you already know the exact amount in the allocated to the department. Right now, you said how much for something? Is that how much? I'll come back to my final. You said 48 or 44 million?
45 billion, but that is for your defense account.
Yeah, 45 billion rand for next year.
For the coming financial year.
Coming financial year. All right, so we'll discuss that when we unpack the budget for the ensuing year. So we want to leave it at that, but please take note of the matters that he's raising. Mr. Mafanya?
Thank you very much. Thank you, SADF. I would also like to concur with Mare that the ball is in your court, that's for. And I really appreciate your presence and how you deliberated on these matters. But now the other issue is that the sweating of assets. You know, we have assets dating back as far as the period of apartheid, where vehicles were fetched from different countries, Namibia, Angola, and they're still with us. And then we keep on hammering on the same issue that these things will be put on auction and all that. But the period now, how do you intend speeding up the process, taking into consideration these things have been there from the 80s to date? Now, the other thing that on the risk mitigating, and is that you said that there is a line where it says compromise defense direction. Can you just explain on that? And then thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mafanya. Any other comments, colleagues, before we close the questions time? Okay, it doesn't look like there's any other hand. SecDef, you may deal
I'll
with this.
give the CFO chairperson on the issue of the assets.
Chairperson, I hear the question from honorable member. In terms of sweating of assets, if we might remember, Chairperson, we engaged the issue of funding model to ensure that how we can go about how much we can get if we sweat the assets. And then while we were doing that, some of the assets, Chairperson, that we are occupying, more especially the properties, belong to the public works as well. We are engaging on that spheres as well, of which, as I'm sitting here, Chairperson, I cannot give you exactly date to say by this date, this process will be finished, because we are engaging also with public works. But the issue of sweating of assets, Chairperson, is still on the table, that we might come up with something, not only the sweating of assets, it's quite a number of areas that we are engaging to make sure that probably we might raise a certain revenue. It's a continuous engagement, Chairperson. That is where, as a department, we are at the moment.
Thank you so much. And there was also a question on the vehicles.
Chairperson, on the vehicles, I heard the honorable member that's asking about the issue of vehicles. I don't know if it's in terms of the what is this to auction the vehicles. If I might remind the honorable members as well. Honorable members, you might remember that we got a ops to SANU, of which that project is the project that dealing with all the mechanical for all the vehicles, that it might be repaired. At the moment, we are busy with that, Chairperson. Once that operation to SANU finish with all the vehicles that it might be repaired, then it will be those ones that we don't need. It will be placed on the auction list by the law division and then get auctioned. So we might get into a risk here, Chairperson, if we are not careful. If we can just go and auction the vehicles, we might auction the vehicles that the defense might need, of which it might result, the implication for that, you might find that if you auction the vehicles that you might need, you won't have funds to buy the vehicles that you might need as well. You rather fix what you can fix. That is the situation that we are facing at the moment.
Okay. I hope you have been answered, Mr. Mafanya.
Not at all, sir.
Not at all.
Yeah,
can you rephrase your question?
Yes. The issue is that I am saying we have been sitting with this since over ages. And the explanation that we got, we even got the very same explanations at Tucson. And we, as I am saying, that the vehicles that were there, they date back as far as in the 80s. Now, my question is, how do we expedite the issues? Because we also know there are also Cubans that were also assisting. We are well aware of the factors around the issue of those assets that needs to be auctioned and all that. But it cannot be that we have to wait endlessly with no time frames that these things are going to be happening. Because the issue is that we may wait for another 10 years and then there won't be any recourse. We'll be sitting here again getting same explanations. That is where I am. To say we have been sitting with a problem over a period of years. How do we begin to get rid of those? You must remember, even the Cubans have been paid monthly to deal with some of repairs of such. So in the process, are we to wait for all vehicles to be repaired, to be put into place, whilst we are sitting with the bulk of things that we do not need? That has been my question. Thank you.
I think the colleagues, the question is very clear. You can't have a time that is not, unlimited. There's got to say we have this project with Tusano that is going to run for this years, and post our engagement with the Chinese, there will be people who would have been trained by them in terms of skill transfer, who will then take over, and they will also run for this long. Once we are done, we dispose of. Or you say, as soon as you get the report from the team that is in the operational Trusano that they've finished with this set of cars, you make a decision, so that you don't wait to make a decision on those that they are finished with them until such time they've completed the whole graveyard of cars. You see, you've got to make a call at some point. What we saw over the weekend, I mean, it's literally a graveyard of vehicles. And we had the advantage because we were flying, and we could see, cars. I can tell you some of them, and unless we do something about them now, you're not going to harvest anything from them because they are way beyond redemption. So I'm saying the department has got to take a decision at some point as to what are its plans towards addressing this problem. An auctioneer was raised an issue last year. It was also raised as an issue this year. And it's possible that it was raised as an issue even 3 years ago. Now, it's no longer that now as an excuse, it's something else. It's fine, but there's got to be time attached to your own program. No, we're not, let's leave it at that for now, because we will meet with you in the new year, but you must come with the answer when we deal with the first court, with your budget for next year. Mafanya, must we leave it at that for now?
Yes.
Mafanya?
No, let's leave it for now until we meet again.
Until we meet again, and that's fine.
And
but
I
please,
The last
please come thoroughly prepared to deal with this question, Secretary. Are you happy with this?
Yes, I think, Chairperson, we take the point, and then we'll just have to find a plan of how we dispose of this. And some of it will actually, it can generate money from scrap metal that the department so badly needs. So I think that we'll come up with a plan and see what needs to be done. The point is taken, Chair. Thank you.
Yes, no, sure. And Mr. Mafanya is waiting to buy one hippo.
Mr. Mafanya, how?
Yeah, no, we need those things there, Baba. Because you can see here in Cape Town is a bit hot. Thank you.
I can see.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Yeah, and thank you very much. Colleagues, I think we've come to the end of our meeting. And let me say thank you very much for taking your time. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Secretary. Best wishes.
Colleagues, we meet again tomorrow morning at 8, eh?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you so much.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair.
Sure, bye.
Bye.